This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewald, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined by my co-host for this show, Jerry Strickmatter. Jerry is a former House member, a state House member from Lancaster County, and is a member of the Susquehanna Board of Directors. Welcome, Jerry. It's so nice to have you here.
It's wonderful being here.
Today we're going to do a whole show on something that I've been interested in for a long time. Of course, every state has a capital city, and Harrisburg is our capital city. And Harrisburg has had its shining moments in the last generation, and it's had some moments where it's been struggling a little bit. And of course, it had a mayor's election last year, and the people of Harrisburg elected a brand new mayor, and we have him as our guest, Mayor Eric Papenfuse. Mayor, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Good to be here.
Oh, it's so nice to have you. Goodness, I've been excited about you coming onto the show for so long, because there's so many things that we could talk about in terms of the capital city. First of all, why don't you tell the viewers a little bit, since we're going to do a whole show about Harrisburg and about your role in resurrecting Harrisburg, a little bit about your background. Where are you from? How did you come to Harrisburg?
My background is in teaching. My wife and I met in graduate school, and we decided to move to the area because my wife got a job teaching in a local college. And I taught in the public school system for a while. It was a wonderful way to get acquainted with things. But I always had an entrepreneurial bug, and we sort of dreamed of opening a bookstore. We were big bibliophiles. We joked that on our first date, I was so impressed with her because she had more books than I did. The first person I had ever met. And Pennsylvania proved to be the best place for that to happen. This was before there was a Borders or a Barnes & Noble, and there was no bookstore in the capital city. But we deliberately created a space around a stage, and we did that because we wanted to emphasize the importance of bringing people together to discuss and debate and have a caffeinated conversation about the issues of the day. We felt that that type of third space was really missing from Harrisburg's culture. And over the years, we've had everything from political debates to, controversial speakers to public forums on educational reform or other legal matters. The city's debt crisis, for instance, got a lot of forums over the years. And that is really what connected me to the city, and it helped me see sort of firsthand the divisions that I felt were really holding Harrisburg back. There were very few places in the city of Harrisburg where the community really came together and crossed over racial lines. And I'm very proud of the fact that we created a space that did that in Harrisburg. Also sort of crossed over class boundaries and generational boundaries. We're one of the few places where kids love to bring their parents, and grandparents will bring their children. And this was all very, very positive. But as your viewers probably know, hard times hit Harrisburg. We made all the national headlines as sort of the poster child of this distressed Pennsylvania municipality that was on the verge of bankruptcy.
Well, in fact, the Financial Times of London did an editorial about Harrisburg and its finances, much to the surprise of folks in central Pennsylvania.
And some of this was due to the fact that we were, like many other distressed municipalities, third-class cities throughout Pennsylvania, but a large portion of the debt was due to a series of very, very unwise financial dealings regarding an incinerator and a special project fund that grew out of the incinerator. At any rate, the debt spiraled out of control to the point where Harrisburg had the highest per capita debt of anywhere in the country, even more than Detroit. And our city council pushed for bankruptcy, in fact, tried to file the paperwork, and the state stepped in and said no and appointed basically a state-appointed receiver. And I, like many in the city at first, were very uncomfortable with this. This was, the end of democracy as we knew it. This was basically the state coming and saying, "We created you, Harrisburg, and we can run you." But they appointed a very interesting gentleman. He was a bond lawyer, and right away he went to work. His name was David Unkovic, in trying to bring the community together and said, look, this is the situation that we have. Let's bring everybody to the table and let's have a conversation about how we can make this recovery plan work. And we had forums at the bookstore, for instance, and he proved to be a very good listener. And he also was quick to say, yes, this doesn't look right. These financial transactions shouldn't have occurred. And he could say that with authority, having been a bond lawyer. And over time, the public sort of grew increasingly behind the process and behind a recovery plan. And you saw an amazing thing happen in Harrisburg. You had everyone come to the table and voluntarily make concessions. So you had the unions voluntarily say, we'll accept less in wages and we'll pay more for benefits, but it has to be part of a full solution. You had the creditors, whether it was the county or the bond insurer, all come and say they'll take 70 cents on the dollar, as long as it's part of a comprehensive solution. I'm not saying everybody was thrilled about this approach, but basically the fact that you did have this power concentrated in a receiver, I think, allowed that conversation to happen where everybody got at a table behind closed doors and said, this is what it's going to take to make the city solvent again. Let's do it. And so we had a recovery plan, and it retired hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. All of that long-term debt associated with the incinerator gone. Basically, the incinerator was sold as a part of the deal. And Harrisburg did something else very, very interesting. It took its most valuable asset, which was our parking. And unlike what happened in Chicago and elsewhere, where if you were following this in Chicago, they sold their parking system for many, many years, 75 years or something, for one big lump sum up front. Harrisburg didn't do that. They said, we need to raise rates, but we're gonna lease the parking system so it'll eventually return to the city, and we're gonna put in basically a profit sharing so that as the parking system brings in more revenue, yes, the creditors will get paid on the back end some of what they gave up to settle the deal, but also the city will make money. And actually this year the city's going to bring in over $3 million from the parking system, which is more than it made when it was running and managing the whole thing. So a very interesting lease and sort of partnership emerged with the parking, and that's been part of the success of Harrisburg. And of course now the receivership has ended, and the mayor is back in charge. And that happened even faster than I thought it was going to happen. It happened within my first 3 months in office.
We're trying to do that. The big problem is, comes from debt is the spending. Have you found the same cooperation when it comes to now spending? Now that you've gotten the recovery plan, in trying to keep spending down. Have you found the same cooperation? Good
point, and that has been a challenge. So what we did was we removed a huge portion of this long-term debt. Harrisburg.
That was all associated. Most of that was associated with the incinerator, right?
Yes, the incinerator and the parking, and there were some other. There was other debt there too.
It always got rolled.
That's right.
And how did you deal with the incinerator then? Just a quick.
So the incinerator was sold to the Lancaster County Authority, right. Which is a good partner for the city right now, and they came in and do it. So it was basically another public entity as opposed to a private entity. Sold for $100+ million, and unfortunately, it alone had racked up $350 million. So it was never going to sell for what the city had unfortunately put into it. And the real saga of the incinerator, and this is something which has statewide implications because the legislature's been debating reforms to Act 47 and reforms to swaps and all sorts of municipal financing, but basically most of that $350 million didn't go into fixing up the incinerator. It went to pay fees and professionals, and it just all of whom sort of had an incentive to keep the payments going, even when the project clearly wasn't working. So, but back to your original question, which is we were still left with a structural deficit that we had to manage very, very closely, and the city, through the Act 47 process and through receivership, had really been cut to the bone. Fewer employees than ever before. And we had about a $1 to $2 million deficit that we were just given. And we've had to manage that very carefully this year by restraining all discretionary funding and having a hiring freeze to make sure that we're focused on just hiring the most important positions. We've been able to hire in police, Public Works, but we haven't been able to make some other hires elsewhere that the city really needs to come up to capacity. We'll do that, but we'll have to do that after we increase revenues. And the goal of increasing revenues is to get more people to want to move into the city.
Mm-hmm. Which is a difficult thing to do, but I know you're addressing that, and I think what's great for all our viewers across the state, we're talking about our capital city, which is very important, but all third-class cities across the Commonwealth, because we're one of the first original 13 colonies, we didn't annex the townships in as they grew like in other states, and so that's why you're left and the people here left with these insurmountable problems that need cooperation, and so that's wonderful for our viewers to hear how you're addressing blight as well. When you talk about having people move in, they want to move into a place that they feel safe and looks good, and the trend line is going up, as far as their value of the property that you're going to invest in. How are you finding that going? Because I know you have doing a big job on the code enforcement. That's been a real focus. Public safety in general has been a focus. How do we make people feel safer, recognize that, repair the relationship between the police and the community, and inspire people to want to come on in and invest and live in Harrisburg. And we've done that by taking a hard look at blight. Harrisburg, like many cities, has a real problem with an older housing stock, which over the years has deteriorated, and as suburbanization happened and people moved out, a lot of these older houses just fell into states of disrepair. And we have a condemnation list of hundreds of properties, 360 properties in the city of Harrisburg. We have a long line, more than we can demolish with all of our resources. So one of the things that we've done is we have established a housing court in the city of Harrisburg to try and centralize all housing-related complaints. And we've actually located that court outside of the city in the county in a means of creating some distance. We had a real issue, I think other cities have this as well, where depending on the district justice, some take the complaints very seriously, others don't take the complaints very seriously. You can go through months and months of citations, you can have the fees waived, you can have a $100 fine assessed for something which gets paid, and then you're back to square one. Well, we've tried to basically standardize the process and make housing court a place where people don't want to go as a deterrent, so that hopefully they will voluntarily fix up the properties. We're also investing in a land bank, which is a relatively new tool that I know Pittsburgh and Philadelphia have begun to use successfully, that allows us as a city, in concert with our housing strategy, to go in and sort of claim certain properties before they hit the tax sale, once they're behind in taxes, and sort of take them out of the hands of speculators and put them into a bank, clear them, and then hopefully give them to people who will develop them. We're engaged in a vacant property ordinance, which is something that has worked well elsewhere in Pennsylvania as well. We're basically a whole series of best practices, all happening at once. And we did something else very important. We put our codes department underneath our police chief. We moved it into public safety so that you have much better communication and a sort of the ability to move to a sort of misdemeanor charge too, if these citations just don't work over time. So a lot of different things on blight. Has to do with that broken window theory, which is if we can improve the physical surroundings, that's step one in rebuilding a sense of trust.
Okay, and we were going to just touch on that, but this is a good segue into our break. We'll be back with Mayor Papenfuse right after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States. and by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Welcome back. On this particular segment, Jerry and I are talking to Mayor Eric Papenfuse of Harrisburg. And just before the break, we were talking about blight. We were talking about some of the things that you and the city of Harrisburg are doing to address the issue of blight. Certainly that's one thing that Rudy Giuliani tried to get a handle on when he became mayor of New York with the broken windows theory. There are so many ways to try to address this. One of the ways that I had heard of some years ago in the city of Baltimore, they did something called urban homesteading, where the city simply gave deserted properties to families that were willing to spend up to 5 years bringing them up to meet all the codes, health codes, safety codes, and fire codes, and the property became theirs. And then it was, went on the tax rolls then. I don't know if that's something that Harrisburg would consider.
Oh yeah, Harrisburg not only would consider it, but it exists now. Basically, there's an entire repository list of properties that are available for just $350. It's not $1 like it was in Baltimore, but it's $350.
That's what it was. That's what it was.
Right, it's $350. And there's a review process that we put in place to try and remove the speculators from those, from that process, and instead put them in the hands of individuals that really want to do something. So we will interview you if you're interested in one of these properties. There's this tension between individuals that are looking to buy a property and fix it up, and others that are just out there to speculate. And we have a real problem. I think other municipalities have this as well with these tax sales, where the properties will go up for sale. You can be a corporation. You don't have to be based in, you can be based out of the country, and the properties will sell for $350, and then they'll be sold on eBay, and they'll go back and forth, and they'll just change title, and you can't really track down the property owner and make that sort of condemnation order stick. And a condemnation order basically says you have X days to fix this up or tear it down or else. And it's sort of the constant battle to track. That's one of the tensions. Another tension is, in the past, historically in Harrisburg, we had a redevelopment authority that accumulated a lot of properties, but didn't have the strategic vision of sort of putting them back into the marketplace, putting them in the hands of developers that would fix them up or individuals that would fix them up. And we've given new direction to our redevelopment authority, and it's merged now with this new land bank to I think have a much different message, which is how do we get those properties in the hands of larger developers and individuals that will do something positive with them. So I love it. If you're out there, you want to come to Harrisburg, you've got the resources to fix them up. Now, fixing up these properties, it's not cheap. It's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars to take a property that you buy for $350 and turn it into something which is safe and a wonderful place to live. But that's still really inexpensive. We're also trying to put together a tax reform in order to make it even more of an incentive for people to do this. There's the LRTA, which is sometimes called tax abatement, which is basically if you come in and fix up one of these properties. Let's say you buy a property from our list for $350 and you put $30,000 into it and you fix it into this beautiful place. Well, to incentivize that and to help with the war on blight, we don't want to tax you on those improvements. And we'll give you a grace period where we'll either phase them in or we won't tax you on them at all for 10 years, just to get that property from a blighted property into an inhabited property. Now, we'll increase our population, that person will pay earned income tax and other taxes, and the city will benefit. But we need that type of incentive. I'm looking to pass LRTA in Harrisburg. We haven't had one. Our last one expired. Many of the viewers perhaps have different forms of LRTAs in different places, but we're looking to do that relatively aggressively here in Harrisburg.
Well, congratulations. You're doing a wonderful job in giving people hope, once again. And maybe you can share with our viewers, what is your plan? Now that you've gone through the best practices, you're using all these wonderful tools. what can they expect to see then in the coming years as far as having home ownership, having more law-abiding people coming in because they're invested in the properties, more businesses, more people coming in? Yeah. What do you say to people about inviting them into Harrisburg to look at? What do you see in the near and little distant future?
Well, the city has the ability to increase its population tremendously. If you look at its population graph over the past 50 years, it went from a high point of almost 100,000 in population, and we're a relatively small city geographically, all the way down to under 50,000. So we don't think it is impossible to see 10,000 new residents over the next decade, and that would be exactly what we need to have in terms of increasing our tax base. We also feel, and if you're in the region, which you are, there is a palpable sense of as Harrisburg goes, sort of so goes the region. We're a small city, but we're the capital, and the population of the surrounding municipalities is very large. We're one of the major tourist destinations in the country here in this region, and I think more so than ever before, there is a sort of collective desire to help the city succeed. And one of the reasons I ran, and one of the things that we're really trying to do, is rebuild those relationships. Harrisburg got itself in trouble when for years it said, we've got this under control. We don't need your help. Don't look too closely at what we're doing. We're gonna do our own thing, county or West Shore. And I've gone out of my way to try and say we're a region, and we want your support. And those rifts that divide us are unnatural. They may be based in geography, but they're unnatural. And I think you'll see that. I think you'll see the goodwill continue to build, the population continue to grow, and the city to come back. Our primary goal for the first term is to remove ourselves from Act 47, which would be a great achievement, because our structural issues are manageable with the right sense of austerity and the proper priorities. We can do it, and we no longer have to be reliant on the state at all. So there you would have a city has not only gone from receivership back into Act 47, but actually out of Act 47 and is fiscally solvent in its own right.
The long-tenured mayor, Stephen Reed, had done many things in terms of in his efforts to try to improve Harrisburg. And one of the things that he was focusing on was museums. Yeah. And we do have perhaps the nicest Civil War museum in the whole country. At the time, Jerry, I made fun of it. Who's going to come to Harrisburg to see Civil War Museum? I'm going to go to Gettysburg. And I did make fun of it, but on camera. And yet, after going through it, I had to apologize and say, this is a national class museum. It's really quite fabulous. What about the other museums? What's on? What's the plan for them? On hold? Forget about them? Or
well, there's no longer a museum strategy. I mean, the city isn't in the business of spending millions of dollars to establish city-owned museums or city-owned stadiums or anything else. Now we encourage private investment, and we'd love to see. We're talking with our soccer team about how we can entice them and the league and the county and others to come in and help build a new soccer stadium on City Island. We've got a great new museum, the Susquehanna Art Museum, which has expanded in its own right. It's gotten some money from the state. It's done a lot of fundraising, and it's building a beautiful new building on 3rd Street in Harrisburg that is going to open next year, and I think be a beautiful example. But key to that is the city hasn't put any money in or any financing. So I am happy to be and I love museums, and I'm a champion of all things cultural and the arts. But this is a different model. The city isn't the one that's doing it. We are trying to tap the public resources out there, the nonprofit organizations, the energy that's there, and bring all that to bear. And on that note, we created a new department of arts, culture, and tourism tourism in the city. This was a major reorganization because I do believe tourism is one of the sort of defining features of Harrisburg. Our festivals located on the beautiful river.
Arts Fest.
Yeah. We just had Arts
successful.
Fest. It's just a wonderful thing. If you've never been to Harrisburg, come to one of our festivals. In fact, if you go to harrisburgpa.gov, which is the city website, you can click on events, and that'll take you to a portal called stayandplayhbg.com, and you can see what we're doing for the 4th of July, or you'll be able to see eventually what we're doing for Capona, and it'll sort of be a rolling thing. But the strategy is basically elevating the grassroots, and it's much more of a bottom-up approach than it is a top-down approach. I don't think government can create museums or draws as well as passionate individuals can. So I want to help facilitate their success. I don't want to direct it.
Tell us a little bit, in the few minutes that we have now, the business strategy, working with small businesses and large businesses that are here now and then bringing those in that are compatible. What's your strategy with that? Working with the state chamber or the region or the state team?
Yeah, absolutely. We did something very interesting in Harrisburg. Another potential thing of interest to your viewers. We created another new department, a Department of Community and Economic Development, which the city had but had fallen away over the years and over receivership, because now is the time to encourage that type of business investment and development. But we went and we got outside funding to fund that department, and it came from the regional chamber, CREDIC, here in central Pennsylvania, and they said it's time to give back to the city. They recognize how important it is that the city lead that economic growth in the region, and they gave the city an endowment for funding this position for 3 years. So we were able to go out, hire somebody, and that person working on all sorts of economic development strategies, including how to work better with the business community.
And how would they contact you to get into that funnel of projects, our viewers?
Just go straight to the city, go to harrisburgpa.gov, and you can find out all sorts of good information.
In one subject that we didn't touch on, and we have
just one.
We have 45 seconds left. What's going to any hope of making the changing course with the city schools? I know that's been a tough nut to crack.
It's a tough one, and I have been outspoken on it, and it's a difficult thing. There are many positive stories within the Harrisburg School District, and at the same time, in aggregate, we have one of the lowest performing school districts in the country. The school district is under a recovery plan and a recovery officer in a way that was similar to the cities in receivership. There is a plan. They've made great strides to get the finances of the school district in order, and that's going to be an evolving situation, and we're going to have to work closely with the school district.
We have to have you come back, Mayor, and talk about that.
Let's have a whole show on education.
We'd love to do that. Okay. And we want to welcome you back again next week to see another episode of Behind the Headlines. We'll see you then.